What is up, everyone? I am Don151.
And I'm Mekkah.
We are bringing to you Chapter 16 of my Fire Emblem 7 Hector Hard Mode 0% Gross playthrough. This chapter represents a watershed moment in any Hector Hard Mode playthrough, and the reason for that is because Lindis' Legion rejoins. And this includes 5 characters. Lyn and Will are kind of scrubs. Ken and Sane are pretty good. They're mounted, and we don't have a whole lot of those. In 0% Gross, they don't get any stats, so unfortunately they don't really get to grow into anything, but they're still pretty useful. But the most important character that joins is Florina, who is our first flyer at this point in the game, and super important. And now, it used to be in the old days when units were judged pretty much solely by combat, that Florina was considered kind of mediocre. But after we quantified the utility of flyers with examples of Florina in this game and Shannon FE6, that's when the concept of flyer utility actually really manifested. So you get to see an example of that here.
Yeah, this chapter is a pretty good demonstration of how good flyer utility is, but the way we're going about it is a little weird. Sure, we do the standard rescue drop where we get Marcus over the cliff on turn 1, but from there we have Bartre rescue drop as far as possible, Dorcas rescuing Hector, and we have Eliwood pick up Priscilla and use a mine. What the hell is up with that?
Yeah, none of that makes any sense at this point, but in a couple of turns everything will become clear for why we did what we did. I will have to say that this is the most complicated rescue chain in this entire playthrough. It took me a long time to plan out. The reason being that it uses all these properties of units that we often don't consider. Obviously, the rescue drop with Florina and Marcus is pretty standard, but then we had to have Matthew pick up Priscilla because he was the only one that had enough movement to do so. We had to pick up Hector with Dorcas because even though Dorcas and Osmond can both pick up Hector, only Dorcas had enough movement range to do so. Eliwood had to be the one to take Priscilla because of the remaining units, he's the only one who could actually take her and survive around a combat with the Pegasus Knight. And then finally we had to rescue drop Bartre onto the mountain because in FE7, fighters have a reduced movement penalty across mountain tiles than other infantry units, so he's the only one of our units remaining who can advance far enough the next turn for the second rescue drop that we do.
Yeah, the rest of the Lindis League isn't nearly as exciting. They're just kind of confined to the bottom right of the map, and their main goal is just to survive. In order to do that, we positioned Will at the edge of 2 Pegasus Knights that would otherwise come down and javelin Lyn to death. Because they have javelins, they will be forced to attack Will, get counterattacked, and be easily finished off by other units. Besides that, their main job is to visit all the shop that we have there. Most important items that we need to buy there are javelins and hand axes. Finally, we have an armory in the shop in our reach for that. And then we have a couple of enemies to kill with Kent and Sane, and then they have to visit the Heavy Spear village before it gets destroyed. Unfortunately, the same thing cannot be said for the Red Gem village, we had to leave alone. But that's okay, we don't need the Red Gem, because money doesn't matter in FE7.
Now, I will point out here that the Fire Emblem community likes to meme on enemy Pegasus Knights in this game as being super weak, and they are relative to most of the enemies, but still they manage to be pretty threatening to us because 3 of them are coming down on us, and they nearly killed Eliwood. So this turn, we have to mop with those Pegasus Knights. We lured them into places where we could easily finish them off, and with that extra mine damage that Eliwood did, Lowen could finish off the Pegasus Knight that he attacked. We complete our 2 rescue chains. The first with Hector is we had Dorcas give Hector to Lowen, who gave him to Florina, who gave him to Marcus, who dropped him. And the second rescue chain is that we passed off Priscilla to Bartre, who dropped her across the cliff. Now, it seemed like Priscilla was in a dangerous position, but that Myrmidon was at low enough HP to retreat to heal. And the main part about this enemy phase is complicated, is guaranteeing Hector's survival. So in a gross playthrough, Hector normally is bulky enough to survive all the Cavaliers because they have swords, so they have weapon triangle advantage against him, and it's pretty unreliable to rely on any dodging. But with some HP and defense growth, Hector can handle it. In 0% growth, he can't. So we had to do 3 things. The first is that we had to give him a Draco Shield, which causes him to have the same defense as Marcus. The second was that we had to give Marcus that one-use hand axe that we set up from the prior chapter. The way that this works is enemies in this game, if they engage in combat against a player unit who has a weapon that would break in the middle or at the end of combat, the AI treats that as being unequipped. So it's as if Marcus doesn't have a weapon and Hector does. And the third item of setup is, in the prior enemy phase, we had to get Marcus to a low enough HP such that we maximize his targeting priority. So he had to be at around Hector's level of HP or a little bit lower. So that's why that Cavalier preferred to attack Marcus. The last thing to note about the enemy phase was we switched Marcus to Florina's Slim Lance because he had to leave that Cavalier above him alive to influence the mage to attack Hector from the forest, instead of causing the mage to stand to the right of Hector and blocking their way to the gate. So super complicated. I hope you caught all of that.
So the unfortunate consequence of that strategy is that Marcus ends up at very low HP at the start of this player phase, and that's why we drop Priscilla over there to heal him up after that. That way he can survive a counterattack from the boss and have 2 shots at killing him instead of 1, because this boss kill is pretty unreliable. We have to rely on a critical hit to kill him. Normally in a gross playthrough, you would be able to 2-shot him with the silver axe, but our Marcus is 1 strength short of doing that. So this is why we extensively trained up Marcus's lance rank in the last few chapters to get him to S-rank lances and get 5% bonus to hit and crit. All that setup was for naught though, because Marcus just ends up crit killing the boss anyway in 1 hit and we never get to see it, but either way, that is chapter 16, completed in 3 turns. We will see you next time.
Goodbye.